guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Haley, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about why I use a wheelchair, what kind of wheelchair I use, and some wheelchair and accessibility issues I have run into, which are kind of funny. No, they actually are funny looking back, so definitely stay tuned to the end of the video for those stories. But with no further ado, let's head straight into the video. So I'm what is called an ambulatory wheelchair user, which basically just means I use a wheelchair even though I can walk. So a lot of people tend to think that most, if not all, wheelchair users are in their wheelchairs 24/7, or they're paralyzed, or they can't walk at all. And that's simply not true. There are definitely people who are in those situations, but there is a wide variety of reasons that lead people to need wheelchairs and to use them. And for me, I just happen to use a wheelchair even though I can walk, and I'm going to share why. So I have mitochondrial disease, and what that is, basically my body doesn't produce enough energy to function properly, and as a result of that I have a ton of health issues which have led me to be needing a wheelchair whenever I walk longer distances. So I haven't always needed a wheelchair. My very first time I needed one was back when I was 11 in the summer of 2012. I had a lot of health issues pop up and I got really weak and I physically couldn't walk very far, and I was having a hard time even at my house walking around. And at that time I was in a manual push wheelchair whenever I went anywhere, and whoever was with me would push the wheelchair because wheeling the wheels of the wheelchair myself would exhaust me very easily. So that was why I was in a wheelchair for the first time, and I was in one whenever I went places probably for under a year, and then my health issues got under control and I was able to build back up strength and endurance, and I was able to actually get to a point over the next few years where I only needed a wheelchair when I was walking really long distances, like at a theme park. And yes, I would still get tired and exhausted and get to a point where I would be weak and I would experience definitely more exhaustion than my peers. But I was able to go through life and push myself physically and be okay. But that changed in 2016, and as a result of multiple things that happened that year, I got my first ever motorized wheelchair, because it quickly became evident that this was not going to be like it was back in 2012, where I could build up my strength and endurance and not need a wheelchair. So we set the wheels in motion, got a motorized wheelchair through my insurance company, and honestly, that gave me a lot of independence, which I wasn't expecting, but it was so nice to be able to go out of the house and be able to control where I went and not have to rely on anyone to push me in a wheelchair, and it definitely was very freeing. It was also really difficult and really hard because I was 15 and it was embarrassing, but I got used to being in a wheelchair, and overall I am grateful for the independence and the freedom it has given me to experience things and not be completely exhausted. Because if I don't use my wheelchair when I walk long distances, this is how I always relay it. I can either choose to walk around a store like Target once, do one lap, and then be bedridden for 2 weeks, be really weak and really exhausted and fatigued and tired and be in a lot of physical pain, also have a lot of brain fog, and because physically overexerting myself puts a lot of stress on my body, stress is a huge trigger for my health issues, and that would trigger so many different symptoms. And I say this is not a hypothetical. This has literally happened to me more than once in my life. So that is why I use a wheelchair when I walk long distances. And for me, it ebbs and flows with how long of a distance I can walk. Like right now at this point in my life, I'm perfectly fine walking around my house. If I go to someone else's house, I'm fine with that. If I'm going somewhere that doesn't require too much walking, I'll just walk in, and there is definitely a very thin line, which is hard to know, between pushing myself to build back up strength and endurance, but not pushing myself too hard to trigger all of my health issues. So because of that, it has ebbed and flowed. When I have more difficulties with my health, I tend to be able to do less physically and walk less. But when I'm doing better, I tend to be able to do more physically and walk more, and it really just depends on the day and the week and what my body has decided, and that is why I use a wheelchair. Another bonus reason I use a wheelchair is because I also have something called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which basically, when I get in an upright position, my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure drops. As a result, blood that's supposed to be flowing to your brain pulls in your lower extremities and makes you really dizzy and lightheaded. It makes it very easy to pass out. So that's another reason. If I stand too long or walk too long without sitting down for a little bit, that's also another reason I use a wheelchair, but the primary reason is because I have mitochondrial disease. So moving on to what kind of wheelchair I use. Like I said, I use a motorized wheelchair. I am actually on my second one. Where I live and the insurance company I have, I'm only able to get a wheelchair every 5 years, and my last wheelchair served me very well. She really did. Until the last year where the wheelchair just wouldn't hold a charge and was slowing down. And so we started the process, and in 2021 I got the motorized wheelchair I now have. And while I do definitely have my complaints about the wheelchair, I do really like it in general. I'm very grateful for it. And now I'm going to put in a clip about my wheelchair, what it looks like, and what brand I use and the features right now. Alright, here is my wheelchair. It is a quickie wheelchair. I'm not sure of the exact model. This is what it looks like, and I love these wheels because they're really good if you're on dirt or on gravel or anything like that. Nice and handy handlebars. This wheelchair has the capability to go into manual if something ever happens. And then these are just for at night when I go on a walk with my dog. They're battery powered lights. They're not a part of the chair. But right here there is a USB plug, and then these are controls, so like I can tilt the chair, recline it, and then this is a recline and move the feet at the same time, and then this is just for the feet, and then here's the actual control. And I believe the fastest my chair goes is like 5.5 miles per hour, which isn't that fast. It sounds like it is, but it isn't. And then battery bar, and then this is at full speed, but there's different speed modes and profiles. I can control my wheelchair from here as well. So that is a little quick tour of my wheelchair. Alright, now to get into the stories I have for you today. I have 2 stories, and these are actually more on the funny and lighthearted side, but I do have some other really frustrating horror stories, but those are for another day. But as a wheelchair user, there are typically 2 reactions I tend to get. One, I'm either treated as the greatest gift on planet Earth and almost like people are honored to be in my presence, which is honestly a little patronizing, or I will just completely be ignored. No matter what I say, how I say it, how many times I say excuse me, how many times I beat my horn on my wheelchair, completely ignored. There's very seldom any in between, but for the people that are in between, I really appreciate you guys. But the first story takes place in Italy, and back in 2019 my family went to Europe for a month, and I am so beyond grateful that we were able to have that experience. And so Europe was actually more accessible than I was expecting for the most part, until we got to Italy. And in all the other countries we went to, it was evident what was wheelchair accessible and what wasn't, and they were very clear. Italy, not so much. There was a definite language barrier for anyone and any place we went to in Italy when it came to accessibility and when it came to Airbnbs in Italy. So it's the tail end of our Europe trip, and we were really looking forward to having like 2-3 days to just really rest and relax in the region of Tuscany. We had booked this wheelchair accessible Airbnb villa, and we were so excited. The host was supposed to come every morning with breakfast, and we couldn't wait. So we get there to the Airbnb, and there's a few villas and around each other, and we were like, maybe there's like a different entrance, maybe this is the wrong villa, because the villa had 15 really long steep steps uphill to get to the villa. So in my wheelchair I couldn't get up to the house, and I physically could not walk that far. So we were like, okay, maybe there's another entrance, because in the Airbnb listing we had booked, it mentioned none of that. It said it was completely wheelchair accessible, and that's what we were expecting. And my parents get to the Airbnb and meet the host, and they realized the Airbnb photos were definitely not what was true. It was a beautiful villa, but definitely not what was advertised. There was steps everywhere, like step downs, and then a staircase, and then the steps to get into the villa, and that was not what was expected. And this is the part where it gets really good. So the Airbnb host, when my parents asked him about wheelchair accessibility and how the listing never mentioned any of these stairs or steps, and there was a definite language barrier, but he did say something along the lines of, "I'm certified to carry wheelchair users upstairs." And my parents were like, "What now?" He's like, "I'll carry her up the stairs, up and down the stairs whenever you need." My parents were like, okay. And then he's like, she'll be downstairs in this bedroom, and then I'll stay in the room next to hers. But don't worry, there's a lock. And with that, my parents were like, "We can't stay here. There's no way, accessibility-wise, Haley can be in here, and there is no way we feel comfortable with a foreign man staying downstairs with her." And it was very nice for him to offer, and I'm very sure he was genuine. But when you're looking at the perspective from us, we don't know this man. I was 18, but still a baby, and it was a little bit of an uncomfortable situation. And so we ended up going about 20 minutes away to this little town called Pienza, and we ended up having a great time there. We stayed at a hotel there, and it ended up being a really great experience. I'm really, really grateful that we got to do. But in the moment when that happened, we were like in disbelief. But looking back, it is such a funny story, and I feel like I didn't even convey it how funny it was, but it was so funny. Hi, pardon the interruption. I rambled for way too long at the end of this video, so I am refilming the end of this video in hopes I get more to the point. But the second story, which is also the last story of this video, coincidentally also happened in Europe, and it isn't really an accessibility issue. It's just something funny, a funny interaction I had because I'm a wheelchair user and in a wheelchair, so I thought I would share it for this video. So this story takes place in London, and me and my mom were in the London tube station, and I had gone in to use the handicap bathroom, and as I was finishing up and coming out, I heard my mom, who was waiting for me, a man was talking to her, and I was like, who's talking to my mom? And so I come out of the bathroom, and the guy who was talking to my mom starts talking to me. And I guess my mom told me he had been asking why I was in a wheelchair, which I don't personally mind that question. And so my mom was telling him, and as I was coming out, that was like right after she told him, you know, I have mitochondrial disease, and he talks to me and he says, look, my sister, something about his sister, my sister swears by this. Like, this really helps with a lot of health issues. Okay, like, listen very closely. You need to do this. Breathe in one nostril and then breathe out, and then repeat it on the other side. And he was so genuine, and he truly meant it from the bottom of his heart. He wanted to help, but it took so much for me and my mom to not break out laughing in that moment, because it was just one of the most ridiculous things ever. And as we were walking away and I was wheeling away from him, we burst out laughing, and we still laugh about this interaction to this day. And I really didn't mind that interaction. It's something really funny that happened, and it really was because that guy, who was an older man, was coming, like, that thought was coming from the most genuine of places in his heart. And so that's a funny story we look back on. But I've had plenty of like interactions like that where, as a wheelchair user, you know, sometimes you get pitied, and other times people are trying to cure you or trying to help you out, and it really does almost always come from a good place. But those are my stories for today. Like I said, I have way more where they have come from, But thank you so much for watching this video and getting to the end of this video. As always, don't forget to like this video, subscribe down below, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.